Today, on Let's Explore This, we are going to be discussing yet another subdivision of Tarboro. This one, it is situated behind the Hart's Cotton Mill building. Though today a mere subdivision of Tarboro, this was at one time a low to moderate income mill village. In order to understand the beginnings of Dean's Heights, we will need to discuss the mill building itself. Yes, it is still standing. Believe me, you cannot miss it, and this is why you cannot miss it. It is just such a huge building, even huge by Tarboro standards. Though the facility has more recently been used for the storage and sale of vintage and old-growth wood products, it does date way back to the late 1880s, when William Almon Hart opened the first cotton mill in Tarboro. It was known then as the Tarboro Cotton Factory. By 1916, it would become the Hart Cotton Mill, which would eventually employ over 600 workers and become a part of the much larger Burlington Industries. In doing so, William Hart would become one of the wealthiest men in all of Edgecombe County. He was part of a handful of men who brought industrialization to the area, which fueled the growth and new wealth here in Tarboro at the turn of the century. Here are the contents of the blueprints collection stored within the archives of the North Carolina State University. In this collection, there are blueprints for the Tarboro Cotton Mill, blueprints dating back to 1936. None of those appear to be digitized, however. Regardless, this likely means the buildings, or at least portions of them, were built by the firm of D.J. Rose & Son. Now, I say portions because the facility is said to date to the late 1880s. Still, there might be a reason as to why blueprints do exist from 1936. You see, a tornado ravaged the area in 1927. It blew away part of the Hart Cotton Mill and destroyed several Tarboro homes. The blueprints do date to about 10 years after the incident, though who knows how long it took to jumpstart the rebuilding process. Maybe, if I were to travel to Raleigh, I could find out, but I do not have the time for that. Moving on to the headline of the September 30th, 1946 Daily Southerner, it announced the first major textile strike in the history of the county. Yes, this is not the paper that holds the article. I would show you it, but I need to renew the subscription for the newspaper site I often use. Oops, no article to show you on this, but do you know where that strike was? Yup, you got it, right here, at this very mill. Half of the employees of this mill walked out, demanding wages of 18 cents an hour higher. The mill offered a 7-cent raise, since employees had just received a 29% increase in May. When the Textile Workers Union won bargaining rights, the mill then offered an 8-cent addition for a minimum wage of 73 cents per hour. A union representative refused that offer, and so it was withdrawn. The workers stayed out a week, but there was no violence during the strike. The final settlement, it gave the employees 70 cents per hour, but did you know that, just 3 years later, Hart Mills was on the nose with yet another strike? Oh yes, 'cause in May of 1949, Tarboro, once again, became the center of strike attention. The textile workers, this time, began a strike that lasted for months and kept 500 people out of work at Hart Mills. The strike served as a test case for union support in southern states, especially in North Carolina. Some workers broke through the picket line and continued to work. That caused divisions within their families. After 7 months, the strike ended without the union's demands being met. After a lengthy and contentious impasse over a new contract, the union gave up its demands for a new union contract and agreed to a renewal of the old one. At the last minute, however, management came up with changes to the previous contract, including a no-strike clause. The absentee mill owners had determined that, since the mill no longer made a profit, it would be cheaper to shut it down than to operate it. They deliberately forced a walkout by making outrageous demands that were unacceptable to the workers. 500 workers called a strike on May 12th of 1949. The strike, which would last for 7 months, early on developed a kind of siege mentality. The company tried to undermine the morale of the strikers by threatening to evict them from company housing. The Textile Workers Union of America gave large sums of money to support the workers. However, they faced enormous odds, since the company did not want to settle and had obtained a court injunction that limited picketing. Initially, the governor, he planned to take no action other than to suggest that the company and the union submit their dispute to arbitration. The union agreed, but, as expected, management refused. A few days later, Kerr Scott, a former governor of North Carolina, publicly denounced the conduct of the company. He stepped up his pressure on management to end this destructive economic warfare. Scott would go on to divulge that the dispute had brought hardship to the townspeople, the workers, and the employer. The company ignored the governor's pleas and refused to budge. The News and Observer, shown here but not the article in question, lauded Scott for his efforts and sided with the union. He went on to blame the mill owners for the impasse by steadfastly and obstinately refusing arbitration. Eventually, the company had won. In effect, it had busted the union. The union leaders had no choice but to call off the strike, and the striking employees, they voted to return to work without a contract. The union's only option at this point was to try and reorganize the plant. The workers, however, they voted against a union bill, and the plant was never unionized. Now, as far as what came to be called Dean's Heights, the Hart Cotton Mills maintained company houses for the exclusive use of its employees. The rental price was well below that for similar houses in the immediate area. Housing was difficult to locate thereabouts. It was admittedly necessary for the employer to furnish cheap housing in order to secure and maintain a full working crew. Interestingly, there was this legal case where the employer was found guilty of an unfair labor practice as a result of his refusal to bargain at any time concerning the sale or rental of the company-owned houses. The court emphatically stated that the houses are often a necessary part of the enterprise. They are maintained by the employer and rented at such rates as to represent a substantial part of the employee's wages. In conclusion, it asserted the subject to be one in which the employees have so great an interest in connection with their work, that it should be a subject of collective bargaining. This case, it came about in 1951, only 2 years after the strike, showing just how criminal industry leaders tend to be. Yes, do not be fooled. You and your boss are not in the same class and do not have the same interests. That is true today, just as it was in yesteryear. Remember The source of their profit is the value created during the process of production that is over and above what is laid out in terms of wages. In essence, you are forced to produce more value than what you are compensated for. That, folks, is legalized theft. Okay, so after walking around this mill a bit, I had come across an interesting find. Right over here by the sidewalk. Here we have the old remains of a railroad track. Yes, it went over there, over in here. You can see they have pretty much covered it up, the path it once took. So, over here, I am walking on what was once an old railroad bed. A railroad bed that, well, had to have, at one time, been taking goods over to the mill. At some point, it probably curved a little bit over to the main tracks, which are over in that direction. Yes, this is a bit of an interesting find. Now, with that said, take a good look at this photo. This photo here. It is of a kitchen hidden away in a Raleigh farmhouse. But why am I showing you that here? Well, in a bizarre turn of events, a bar top and a kitchen desk, likely shown in this photo, is said to now be located in this kitchen. The thing is, that bar top and kitchen desk is from the Hart Cotton Mill. Now, we need to talk about another kind of union, one between a church and a recreation center. In that union, it goes something like this. So, the Hart Mill once had a recreation center. How do I know that? On a fateful Sunday in 1949, about 30 followers of Christ met for the first worship gathering of what was then the Hart Village Baptist Church. Where did they meet, might you ask? Well, yes, in what they refer to as the Hart Mill Recreation Center. Permission was granted to use the Recreation Center building at the mill for worship services. The mill even offered to pay for electricity and heat. Members of Tarboro's First Baptist Church faithfully served as Sunday school teachers as attendance grew. Now, I do not know exactly where in this mill that recreation center was. Besides, the building appears locked fairly tight. I doubt there is any getting inside. Steadily, for a short time, the Hart Mill Mission was renamed the Calvary Baptist Church. However, since Tarboro already had a church with Calvary in its name, the name of this one was changed to the Trinity Baptist Church. And later, a Sunday school building was constructed on land donated to the church by the Hart Cotton Mill. In June of 1978, the present sanctuary was dedicated. This is the current location of the church today. Ironically, despite the historic nature of the area, the Dean's Heights vicinity, it is not even recognized by the State Historic Preservation Office. A survey appears to have never been done on the area, at least as of the time this episode was filmed. Because if it was, the area circled on this map here would be lit up with cute little dots, and as you can see, it is not. Even the mill, which certainly does hold a historic presence, is not even recognized. I don't know why that is when there is this journal article from 1990. Of interesting note is this. One turn-of-the-century mill house, threatened with demolition for a street-widening project, was moved and restored to its original appearance. This renovation served as a model for other rehabilitations by showing that historic preservation does not deal solely with the architecturally significant mansions of the well-to-do, such as this house right here. Historic preservation can, and must, reflect the history of the working class and its influence on the growth and development of an area. The fact that this neighborhood has yet to be recognized, given the nature of the historic strikes, could be considered a travesty. Of course, this article insists that an effort to preserve this mill village has been considered. The historic district of Tarboro, yes, it could use an expansion. And with that said, we now have to move on to our next destination.